Gentlemen, can I invite you all please to take a seat, and we will get our official proceedings underway. It's wonderful to see so many of you here this morning on this beautiful Queensland, I was going to say winter's day, but not quite. It certainly feels like winter has arrived. So please, if you can find a seat. I think we might be a bit short, but the event this morning is not that long, so you won't be that long on your feet. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome. I'm Kay McGrath, and it is my pleasure. Yes. Kay McGrath from Channel 7, but most proudly Chair of the Domestic and Family Violence Implementation Council and a long-time child protection advocate. So it really is a pleasure to be with you here today. I'd like to thank you, my fan club over to the right. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered here for this important occasion, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge and very warmly welcome the Honourable Di Farmer, the Minister for Child Protection, Youth and Women, and the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence. Welcome to the lovely Lenine Fordes. So good to see you, Lenine. Senator Claire Moore is hoping to join us, as is the Honourable Chief Justice Katie Holmes, the Director General of Child Safety Michael Hogan. Welcome, Michael. Bob Atkinson, the Chair of Truth, Healing and Reconciliation Task Force. A very warm welcome to all of you. And we have apologies this morning from Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, who very much wanted to be here, but business has taken her away. We've got an apology from Bob G, who's the newly appointed Director General from the Department of Child Safety, Youth and Women. Kathy Taylor, the CEO of the Department of Child Protection from South Australia, wanted to be here but sadly was unable to make it, as was Ken Smith. That name I'm sure will be familiar to many of you. The former DG of the Department of Families. Diane Rowan, Assistant Director, Catholic Education Office. Anthony Benedetti, formerly of the Commission for Children and Young People and Child Guardian, and also apologies this morning from Sonia Bayers, who is a current Forde Foundation member. So many people wanted to be here with us today, but that wasn't possible. So to make sure that we share the day as far as we possibly can, we're live streaming our speeches today. Now, the cameras will be on our speakers at the lectern, not on members of the audience. So a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us through the live stream. People have come together around the state this morning. They're hosting morning teas in some areas, but they wanted to be part of this really important and memorable occasion. So a shout out to those from Lotus Place in Rockhampton and Townsville. Welcome. To those joining us, to your warm welcome here from our wonderful audience. Welcome to those joining us from the many units of Child Safety, Youth and Women. They're from the Child and Family Operations, Strategic Policy and Legislation, Office of the Regional Executive Director in the South West Region, Redress Records Retrieval Team, and the Rockhampton and Townsville Child Safety Service Centres. Welcome to you. Thanks for tuning in. And also welcome to the Youth Justice Officers in Roma. I bet it was a bit chilly out there this morning, and Charleville and Toowoomba, speaking of chilly. They're also tuning in. Welcome. And just think, 20 years ago, we would not have had that technology, would we, to have such an inclusive event. So it's wonderful. For many people here today on the rooftop of Goma, this is going to be, I would imagine, quite an emotional event. We want you to know that we have your backs. You are in a very safe space. We have support staff here available from MICA Projects and the Department of Child Safety, Youth and Women. People with the purple lanyards around their necks are your go-to people if you just want to have a quiet moment with somebody and feel you need a little bit of support. As many people here this morning, I'm sure, also feel, I feel hugely privileged and honoured to be part of this day, to be here with you, because I am amongst so many courageous and inspiring human beings, including you, Michelle. To be here today and to be able to commemorate 20 years since the Forde Inquiry, people had to dig deep and find the courage to step up and to speak up and to share painful stories. Then others had to find the courage to step up and to act. In 1996, Kev Lingard was the Minister for Family, Youth and Community Care, as it was called back then, and he decided to act. He made a ministerial statement in Parliament outlining concerns of abuse in Nearcol in Rockhampton. Now, following this, in July 1998, the Queensland Children's Commission released a report into Nearcol. And this, as we all know, subsequently led to the appointment of the Honourable Lenine Forde, also Jane Thomason and Hans Hilpern, to the Commission of Inquiry into Abuse of Children in Queensland Institutions in 1998, known as the Forde Inquiry. And that inquiry heard from over 100 people, about 150 institutions, and the hearings were held in private, and there were 151 written submissions. 20 years ago today, on the 31st of May, 1999, the Forde Inquiry report, with its 42 recommendations, was handed over to the Queensland Government. So much to reflect on today and what's happened over those 20 years and how we've come to be here. Before we hear from our speakers, I'd like to introduce to you a much-loved and very well-known woman. Songwoman Marucci is the songwoman and the lawwoman of the Turrbal people, the original inhabitants of Brisbane. She was the first Indigenous Australian to perform on the Australian operatic stage. In 1993, she became the first Australian to perform at the United Nations in New York. That was in honour of the International Year for the World's Indigenous Peoples. Songwoman Marucci will perform a traditional blessing for this gathering. Please join me in welcoming Marucci.
Yadani Australian Abayagari Murumbaga Da Kolamaiki Perandanga you Biginumba Ikita Milin Murumba Bulkairi Yadani Australia Boo Taganuruna Lake Yowa Yadani Australia Balamdiko Gundulumbaler Balamdiko Gundulumbaler Yang Indai Yango Gundai Yango Balamdiko Gundulumbaler Balamdiko Gundulumbaler Bulkari Marumba Kurupanu, that's welcome to this area of Brisbane in the language of the Turrbal people, in accordance with the customs of the collective of tribes of southeastern Queensland, for whom we are part of when we do the welcome to country. That is done as a blessing of the gathering and song. We'd like to do that in a Tinchy while, but we'd like to just acknowledge why we are here today, and also acknowledge all the courage of the people who've spoken up and things like that, because I myself lived 10 years in the Cherbourg Girls' Dormitory, but when I read of the other people's experience, I think their experience is more painful to a certain extent than ours were, because at least we had our community immediately around us, and a lot of people were alienated from their community completely. So I acknowledge the hurt that a lot of the people have gone through. I shall now do the blessing of the gathering. Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Bithal Gariathal, Gavai Garibuja, Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Manda Baritha, Muriana men. Garinyanami, Chuchamobiron, Garinyanami.
Thank you, Marucci. We have a small token of appreciation for you. A very important blessing. Thank you for that acknowledgement as well to all our lovely guests here this morning. Well, from one powerful voice to many other powerful voices. For the past 5 years on Wednesday nights at City Hall, a group of people from diverse walks of life have been coming together to perform as one voice. Under the leadership of professional choral conductor Kathy Mundy, the choir has performed at quite a number of events and venues, including the QPAC's Concert Hall, the Queensland Music Festival, and annually, of course, for Microproject's National Apology to the Forgotten Australians and Former Child Migrants Anniversary Concert, Songs of Justice, at the State Library of Queensland. I heard them warming up before, and they sounded beautiful. Would you please welcome With One Voice.
Thank you so much. It's a real honour for With One Voice Brisbane to be with you here this morning. Thank you for turning your heads to share this space with us. That was a song that we wrote as a bit of a choir warm-up to start our rehearsals every Wednesday night at the Brisbane City Hall Wynnum Room to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we sing and to get everybody's voices aligned with each other. This song now really encapsulates the feelings and philosophies that we have about the power of song to unite people, to break down barriers between us, to open our hearts and to heal us. It's a beautiful song by Faye White, an Australian singer-songwriter from Melbourne area. It's called All Around the World, and it has a very simple chorus. Are you in the mood for singing? You look like you could be a singing crowd. Could we give the chorus a go? I'm going to teach it to you. So the first little bit goes, all around the world. With me? All around the world. Beautiful. You should all come and join With One Voice Brisbane. You've passed the audition. No, we don't have auditions. The next bit goes, all around the world. With me, all around the world. Next phrase, all around the wide world. With me, all around the wide world. That was fantastic. Keep that going. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All around the world. All around the world. All around the
all
Voice Brisbane. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kath Mundy, and With One Voice. I wonder if they were singing in Roma and Charleville and Toowoomba. I hope so. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. And I didn't know that Bob Atkinson and Lenine have such good voices. They do. Thank you very much, choir. That was lovely. And I bet you have a lot of fun on Wednesday nights. Yes, you certainly do. Well, ladies and gentlemen, progress often takes a long time. Change can be difficult. And to bring that about, strong leadership is required. I've had the pleasure to work closely with our next speaker this morning, and I can attest to her genuine commitment and her passion about making life better for people. And she's displayed extraordinary leadership in this space and outstanding energy as well. Could you please give a very warm welcome to the Minister for Child Safety, Youth and Women and the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence, Di Farmer. Thank you, Di.
Thank you, Kay, for those very warm words. And I too acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathering and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I grew up on Byerley country. I want to thank, what a wonderful welcome we've had from Maroochy and With One Voice. That was an absolutely beautiful way to start the day. And Lenine Forde and I were just saying we might head down on a Wednesday night as well. So, although Kay has already done some acknowledgements this morning, I want to add my voice to those acknowledgements to Lenine Forde AC, former chair of the Commission of Inquiry into Abuse of Children in Queensland Institutions. I know that Chief Justice Catherine Holmes is going to be here this morning, Senator Claire Moore, to Karen Walsh AM, who is the CEO of MICA Projects, to Rob Ryan, who is the chair of the Forde Foundation Board of Advice, Mr Bob Atkinson, AC APM, former Police Commissioner, former Royal Commissioner and now Chair of the Truth, Healing and Reconciliation Task Force. I acknowledge the many people who are here today who are supporters of this cause and who have been following the progress of Queensland, following the progress of those with lived experience. I acknowledge all of those people who are here today, but most of all, I acknowledge the people who are here with a lived experience. And can I say that it has been my absolute honour to be the Minister responsible for a lot of the work that is happening as we try every single day to make reparation, to make amends for what has happened to each of every one of you. And I want to say thank you for the bravery, the patience that you show with us as we try and do the right thing, and for just I can actually never believe how you keep on telling us, you keep on sharing, you keep on waiting patiently for the right things to happen, and I am astonished by you and inspired. As a human being, I feel inspired by you, and I want to thank you for that. Today is about acknowledging your achievements over the last 20 years. And I'm just looking up, I don't know if all of you have had a chance to see the timeline up there, and if you haven't, please make sure that you have a look at it, because it tells a story about the journey, and I want to acknowledge the staff of my department who put that together, and we will now have that as a permanent installation. I'm not sure where it's going to be. I'll find out about that afterwards. But if you read, Kay referred to some of the significant milestones, and we know that on this day 20 years ago, Lenine Forde handed down her report. But you read things up there like the 25th of March, the New Child Protection Act 1999 was passed by Parliament. 25th of August, Queensland Government response to the Forde report. 29th of April, Sir Leslie Wilson Youth Detention Centre closed. 5th of January 2004, Protecting Children report from the inquiry into abuse of children in foster care report was released. 16th of November 2009, National Apology to the Forgotten Australians and former child migrants. There are so many milestones there which have meant something, and most importantly of all, they have meant that we are making progress. And I, like every single person in Queensland who started hearing the stories of abuse, the stories that you had to keep to yourselves for so many years, that you never had a voice for, as we started hearing those stories and realising what shameful things had happened in our state, and that you had never had an opportunity to speak of those, you had never had anyone to advocate for you, and I think it was a sense of shame and just disbelief that this could have happened in our state, and that's why the Forde Inquiry and Lenine Forde's report was so important, because it said, and that's enough, that is enough, and we must recognise this. I also acknowledge Bob Atkinson, who was one of the commissioners on the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. 5 years. 5 years, and I know many of you put your hands up again, and you came forward again, traumatic as that must have been, and you put yourselves forward because you knew that you had to do that to make a difference. And I speak to so many of you, and you talk about the healing for you, the quest for what happened to be recognised and for something to be done about that. But you also speak about doing that so that children now and in the future do not have to suffer in the same way as you do. And they are such important things, but a huge thing to come forward and speak about that again. And I don't imagine any of us actually know what that must have been like. Today is your day, and we pay homage to you and the children and young people who are still in our system, and unfortunately there are still too many bad things happening to our children and young people, but there are many of those children who have you to thank, because since Lenine Forde's report, we have had to work on this. We have had to look at ourselves as a government and as a community and say, what are we doing right, but what are we doing wrong, and how do we actually fix that? And it's because of you that is actually happening now. You have been absolutely determined to tell that truth. It's why many of you will remember that Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, and I tell you, she was so disappointed she couldn't be here today. She spoke in this very place and said she would be setting up a Truth, Healing and Reconciliation Task Force. And that has now been established and chaired by Bob Atkinson, and there are members of that task force in the audience today, and they are determined to oversee the implementation of the recommendations of the Royal Commission, but to make sure that they are advocating for all of you, advocating for all children and all young people, to make sure the things that you know too much about do not happen again. And they have a big agenda. And today I want to announce one of the things that is on that agenda, which is the Truth, Healing and Reconciliation Grants Program. We are releasing that today, and we are going right out across Queensland because we want people to apply for those grants to actually put into place truth and healing and reconciliation in a way that means something to you, that you know is going to make an impact. Organisations will be able to apply for up to $10,000 and joint applications for up to $15,000. And we are asking people for lived experience to apply for those. And one of the things the task force members tell me a lot is that we need to educate. We need to make sure that people are aware of what happened and to watch that it doesn't keep on happening. We need to educate school children. We need to educate people in the community. They don't know enough. And this is what we hope this grant funding will do. And we are looking forward to seeing the many ways in which we can actually take that message out to the community. This morning, people gathered in West End as part of Link Up Queensland's National Sorry Day, and we know that many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were placed in missions and dormitories simply because they were Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And so today, as we mark the 20th anniversary of the Forde Inquiry, I would like to pay tribute to those people who gathered in West End to the stolen generation. Today may be quite an upsetting day for people, and I can't even imagine how difficult that might be for many. But what I can say to you is that I stand with you, and every single person in this room stands with you, and you are absolutely so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for sharing that good news about the grants program as well. I'm sure that will be very warmly welcomed. It's time now to hear from someone who has a very special place in our hearts, the Honourable Leneen Forde. Without any further ado, I was going to tell you she was Queenslander of the Year and a few of her other achievements, but I think they want to hear from you, Leneen.
Oh my goodness, there's so many of you here. It's absolutely wonderful to see so many people here. I feel really honored to have ever been asked to chair that commission. It's great to see you all, and you're all smiling, and I'm really coming down on Wednesday to have a sing with them all. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Minister, and I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I haven't got a speechwriter anymore, and I had to write it out myself this morning. And I find that most people have said everything I wanted to say. So if I double up, I really wanted to just stand up here and look at all of you, because you're all come such a long way, and you've done really well. And great to see. You know, when I was asked to do that inquiry, and we had Eileen Jones here with me today, we went around looking for an office, and we just opened the door and had looking around when there's Alan Alloway. And he was really threatening. I thought if we didn't get this job done well, we were in serious, serious trouble. So I acknowledge Alan's still alive too, and so am I. So 20 years has aged us a little bit, and as Michael said, that I'd shrunk, and that's because I don't wear high heels anymore. But I want to thank you for inviting me here just to speak a couple of words to all of you on this 20th anniversary. It's been a wonderful journey, I'm sure, for many of you, and I hope that you keep looking to the future with joy in your hearts and make it better, because you've made it better. Starting with Alan, it was very brave people who came to talk to us in the first place. It would never have been a success without the courage of those who did come forward. And the fact that they trusted us to listen and believe in them. There were terrible stories, really, to listen to, let alone to live through. But they certainly left a lasting impression on me, and I'll never forget them. I want to acknowledge, though, the assistance that I did receive from the other people there. There was Jane Thompson and Hans Halpern. Eileen's here today, Eileen Jones, and Kate Holmes, who's now the Chief Justice, for goodness sake. She was just a little young barrister, so she did a lot of work with the inquiry, and look at her now. So there are many others whose support and wisdom made such valuable contributions, so I do want to thank them. And a lot has happened in the intervening years to raise awareness of abuse and the redressed mistreatment of children that we must never forget. And I think we would ask the people that came to us what they'd like to see come out of the inquiry, and they weren't asking for compensation or for anything. They just didn't want it to happen again. That's what they would say. We don't want it to happen to other children. So they did raise awareness for all of us, I think, and we must never forget that contribution, because a nation's most valuable and vulnerable asset are its children. And so we must always accept responsibility for them. Every one of us must. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. We'd just like to take a moment now to acknowledge and remember that those who are no longer with us, and I wonder if you would join me in a minute's silence as I light this candle for them. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Robin. And thank you again, Lenine. It's so lovely to have you here. We are running a little behind schedule, but we have just a couple more speakers for you before we take a break, or we conclude, and you're invited to stay back till about 12:30 to network and enjoy a cup of tea. Now, the Honourable Anna Bligh AC was the 37th Premier of Queensland from 2007 to 2012, and she was the first female Premier of Queensland, and of course Lenine was the first female Governor. Prior to being Premier, the Honourable Anna Bligh's first ministry was as Minister for Families, where her first act was to establish the Commission of Inquiry into the Abuse of Children in Queensland Institutions. Anna Bligh, as many of you will know, is currently CEO of the Australian Banking Association and former Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA in New South Wales. Anna has sent a special message for us today.
Good morning, fellow Queenslanders. Today is a very important anniversary and I'm glad that you can come together and celebrate it. I deeply regret not being able to be there with you, but I'm pleased to share a few of my thoughts and memories. I was sworn in as a minister for the first time on the 29th of June 1998, and just 6 weeks later I drove up to Government House to establish the Forde Commission of Inquiry. So I was very, very new as a minister, and for most of my time in that first term, much of the work I was focused on was the work that was being done by this Commission of Inquiry. I well remember calling up Lanine Forde in the middle of the night because she was in Canada visiting family and asking her if she would consider being the Commissioner. To her great credit, Lanine understood from the very first question that I asked her that this was going to be a very tough Commission of Inquiry. But she accepted the role and I was very pleased. I knew that the success of this Commission of Inquiry would rise and fall on the quality and the calibre of the person who was heading it. From day one, Lanine Forde brought a great deal of credibility and authority and gravitas to this commission. She made it clear that this was going to be a very serious examination of the truth. She also brought from day one a great deal of compassion. Lanine understood that this was going to be a Commission of Inquiry that would bring out some very, very difficult matters, and that this would have to be very focused on people and on listening to the voices of those people. This Commission of Inquiry could never have happened if there hadn't been literally thousands of people who were prepared to tell their story, prepared to come forward and to talk about things that for many of them they had never spoken about, or in many cases they had spoken about and they had not been listened to and they hadn't been believed. For me, the great lesson of the Forde Commission of Inquiry is the immense power of the truth when it has been long denied. For so many people, this was their first opportunity to speak in a safe place, to be heard, and most importantly, to be believed. 20 years on, I hope everybody in this room and everybody who's been associated with the Commission of Inquiry and the work that's been done since feels a great sense of pride. So many people were courageous and brave, and what it resulted in, because of their bravery and their courage, was a comprehensive report that saw, firstly, an acknowledgement that this was our history, and this was a truth that all of us had to share and acknowledge. Secondly, an apology that still hangs on the wall of Queensland's Parliament. It also brought considerable change to how the state looked after the most vulnerable children, and it saw the closure of some detention facilities and a very, very big shift in how people thought about the care of our most vulnerable children. The Forde Commission recommended that the government look at a redress scheme. As many of you will know, that wasn't something that happened in the early days after the inquiry, but I was delighted when I had the opportunity and got my hands on the purse strings in my first year as Treasurer to put a redress scheme of many millions of dollars in place for those people who had lived through these experiences. All of that is all due to the many people who came out and spoke, and those who have supported them both before and after this inquiry. Well done, everybody. This was important work. It's really mattered, and it's happened because of you. I hope you enjoy some time in each other's company today.
We're delighted that Anna was able to send that message, and there another powerful advocate and champion. So I'm sure our thanks will be passed on to Anna down in New South Wales. And we are delighted, Lenine, that you accepted her phone call and her challenge. Thank you. Now, in winding up, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned tireless advocates earlier in the day. It's now our pleasure to invite for some very brief closing remarks another champion. Would you please welcome Karen Walsh to the microphone?
You know, it's amazing that it's 20 years, and I think we need to do our timeline as well, as because it probably started 5 years before. In many pubs, I have to say, because there was nowhere else that would let us in. But I think we're all glad we're still here, because during that time there were some pretty rough times. But it's been my privilege. It's not often you get the opportunity to work and be involved with something for 25 years, or 40 years really. But I think the song you sang about One World, it just made me think of how your vision for change was never just about Brisbane or Queensland. It was, your sights were on the Vatican, your sights were on the British government, your sights were on the Queensland government. I remember people coming in with Skype sessions to Nova Scotia, to Ireland, and, you know, we should acknowledge those people who aren't with us today, like Peggy Rush and Beth Wilson and many others too, who were tireless in their advocacy. The funniest story really of advocacy was Peggy ringing me up for the 013 number for the Vatican, of which we weren't sure there was one, but we found it. And Peggy ran the Vatican every Sunday night and spoke to a lovely nun who told her what the popes were up to. But it was certainly an experience too. And I suppose it's because your vision has always been that this is a world that, just as we proclaim we are fair, we are equal, and we believe in justice, and the legacy of your commitment to make that true and on the records of Queensland has had worldwide implications. And I suppose it is that ripple effect, like it's not really that any of us alone could have ever achieved so much. But I'm glad the Minister said she wants to see this as a permanent thing, because that would mean we'd have to have a permanent place to put it. So maybe the idea of having a child welfare museum or library or something for Queensland is something that we could consider, so that all this effort and everything could have belong in a public place that is about citizenship in Queensland, and to bring in the other aspects that have happened across the world. I'd just like to thank my organisation, MICA. You all know the many people that have worked across MICA for the 20 years, and I'd just like to thank their tireless efforts in supporting me, our board and our staff, and all of these events that we have, and Relationships Australia, who ran the first aftercare resource centre, Link Up. The NGOs that have been involved have played a vital role in helping and getting those voices, your voices, heard. So please, could you applaud all of the people that have done that? What we've learnt, though, is that the Forde Inquiry's work will never be over, that we can never rest on saying we've achieved any recommendation about child protection without really sustaining the vigilance we need every single day to make sure children are safe, to make sure that we don't forget we can prevent removal of children if we invest in it. And we've still got a long way to go to get that investment balanced. So in finalising, I'd just like to thank Kay. we've always wanted, it's always been your passion that it not just be seen as a service hidden somewhere, but that this issue of the Forde Inquiry, the recommendations, your life experience, and that the legacy of child abuse and separation from family is lifelong. And Kay, just giving us your profile, your reputation and your leadership makes sure that more people hear about it. And I know that that's the passion that you all hold, that more and more people actually know what you have lived through and that it still is affecting you today, even though you have courage and healing, but it's still there as a reality. So thank you, Kay. I know everyone really appreciates it.
Beautiful, very unnecessary, much appreciated. Karen, thank you for those lovely closing remarks and wrapping it all up so beautifully. And thank you for your leadership. She's an ideas woman, isn't she, Minister? Hey, a museum. You see that? And when's the budget being handed down next week? And I would have thought if anybody had a direct line to the Vatican, it would be you, Karen. We have until 12:30 to enjoy some networking and some morning tea, but I just need to tell you there is a photo booth, if you haven't already discovered it, which has been set up, and this is another way to really remember today and how important it is. So it's an opportunity for you to write down a brief message perhaps about what the Forde Foundation, the Forde Inquiry has meant to you. You might like to write a little message to Lenine, and then pop into the photo booth and you can have your photo taken with your message. And again, it might end up in that museum one day. Callie is over at the photo booth and she will help you with that. And also Simone. Where's Simone? There she is in that lovely leopard print top, looking gorgeous. Simone is going to be wandering around during morning tea with a recording device. And so if you have a few words that you might like Simone to record for prosperity, she's the girl to see. So it's just about sharing your thoughts about the inquiry and about your journey, but in a very, succinct way, and that would be wonderful and much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the formalities. Thank you so much for coming along this morning and making it such a memorable and enjoyable event. Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful day.